Rom V is a name I was sadly unfamiliar with until recently. After speedrunning Jonathan Hickman's Fantastic Four and Avengers, I decided I needed a break from the big two superhero affairs and sought out some other works I had been hearing about for a while. I realized that Rom V had a few different series that had made their way onto my TBR list, and D Savage Shores was the first one I decided to dig into. This is a quick read spanning only 5 issues, published by Vault Comics in 2018 with art by Sumit Kumar, colors by Vittorio Estone, and lettered by Aditya Bidika. This story takes place during the 1760s and begins with a vampire being banished from England, seeking refuge on an East India Company ship and arriving at the Malabar coast only to find that there are darker forces there than his own. I knew next to nothing about the story when I cracked it open and had no idea what to expect, having no familiarity with Rom V's other works. What took me by surprise was the fact that this is not just a horror story, not just a message about colonization, but also a love story, forced to endure a dark and tragic war. We see a couple talking together under a tree, Bishan and Corey. Corey asks Bishan to tell her again how he was made. Her love responds, talking as if reciting a creation myth. Bishan speaks of himself as an ancient creature despite appearing perfectly human. A common theme in Rom's work is intricate world building, whether it be a long epic like his Detective Comics run or a 5-issue miniseries like this. And when it comes to the more mystical side of things, he is no stranger. He is currently writing DC's New Gods, taking inspiration from Indian culture and mythologies to recontextualize the fourth world in a new light, building on these characters in a very interesting way. In these Savage Shores, we see the more recognizable, traditional vampire encounter ancient and dark beings like Bishan, who we do not know much about until later in the story. Each issue contains another look into Bishan's past through conversations with Corey or his own recollection, and we quickly find out that he is something ancient, something savage. An English vampire by the name of Pierrefonte arrives in Calicut, and it becomes apparent quickly that he believes this new land will be his playground. We also get narration from his point of view in the first half of the issue, explaining his exile and reporting back to his colleagues. He was exposed and wounded by a vampire hunter, forcing his companions to send him away to preserve their own safety. We briefly glimpse what appears to be the vampire hierarchy of London in the aftermath of Pierrefonte's attack. He is greeted at the dock by a colonel who tasks him with befriending the young Prince Vikram in hopes of further securing trade routes in the area. He soon arrives at the palace grounds. Left alone in his quarters, Pierrefonte writes that he senses something strange about this place, that something old and primal lurks here. From the first encounter with his host, his arrogance shines through. He is not outwardly hostile or rude to the prince, but he clearly does not respect him or recognize his authority. Bishan is present at the prince's side, wearing a mask and clearly keeping an eye on this new arrival. Later that night, Pierrefonte takes a horse from the stables and goes out to prey on an unsuspecting woman. He finds Corey isolated, bathing in a river, assuming her an easy target. He stalks out of the shadows, gloating over her. He insults her, making remarks that belittle her and Calicut as a whole. It is in these final pages of issue 1 that I really got pulled into this story. As Pierrefonte stalks toward his prey, his facade quickly falls away as he is thrown headfirst into the water. He struggles back to his feet as we see his last moments, paralyzed with fear, staring at some unseen monster. Corey watches as blood fills the water around her. The final page of the issue shows Pierrefonte, or rather his corpse, entering the township on horseback, his severed head placed in his hands. The conflict along the coast progresses throughout the rest of the issues, and we are slowly introduced to more characters that really flesh out this world. The first of these, Zachariah Stern, is the vampire hunter who exposed Pierrefonte in London. He has followed his trail to Calicut, and he has a similar feeling that this land is home to many dark forces as he investigates the area. Bishan's outlook and actions throughout the story provide a unique perspective, as there is not any character who is painted as a protagonist or even a good person, albeit from the undercast. Instead, we receive multiple POVs of those driven to unimaginable lengths due to the ongoing hostilities in the region, aggravated further through the actions of the East India Company. I could do a character study on almost the entire cast, and they are all developed fairly well, regardless of how large a role they play in the overall story. Every foreigner who arrives in Calicut has a clear disdain or at least a lack of respect for the native people there, but none of the writing or characterization feels like any sort of message or agenda being pushed, but like a painfully accurate period piece guised in a horror story with vampires and demons. The strength of this book is how Rom is able to weave all of these themes together and produce a wholly unique story that left me wanting more every step of the way. Corey is troubled as she is slowly coming to the realization that Bishan is essentially immortal and worries that he does not value their time spent together. Bishan assures her this is not the case, but she is still bothered by this. The two often meet in secret, and Corey is tired of hiding. Stern gathers that there would only have been a handful of people with the means and opportunity to take out Pierrefonds in the short time since his arrival. Chief among these suspects is Prince Vikram himself. He rationalizes these thoughts by stating that there must be some dark force at work in or around the prince for him to hold such power and influence at such a young age. Stern sneaks his way onto the hunting grounds as Vikram and Bishan are setting up to kill a leopard, which has begun snatching children out of their cribs in the region. Vikram tells Bishan that he misses his father, and asks if living forever makes the grieving process any easier. Bishan remarks that it is different, but not easier. Bishan spots the animal, and as Vikram reaches a vantage point to take a kill shot, Bishan descends to the ground, drawing a blade to lure the beast out. In the commotion, Stern targets the prince with a crossbow and takes his shot. It is here we get to see Bishan's true form for the first time, that of the Rakshasa. He scales the tree and stops the bolt before it could reach the prince. He quickly moves to kill Stern, but is stopped by Corey as she cries out his name. The leopard leaps at her and is stopped by Vikram landing a fatal shot on the beast. Bishan rushes to her side and holds her as we cut back to London. News of Pierrefonds' death has now reached England, and we glimpse the vampire lord, Count Grano, receiving this news. The Count decides he must retaliate, and we see that Stern is now imprisoned by order of Prince Vikram. Issue 3 shows the Count seeking more information about Pierrefonds' demise and making his way towards Calicut. Bishan and Vikram meet with the Sultan as he attempts to convince Vikram to send men to join the conflict against the East India Company. Vikram blames the Sultan for his father's death and is unwilling to cooperate. The Sultan appeals to Bishan and also says he knows what Bishan truly is. This takes the man by surprise, but the Sultan continues, naming him King of the Zamorin, the Rakshas. He says he knows that if Bishan wanted to, he could probably win this war by himself. Bishan responds saying that he has had his fill of war and wants no part of any further bloodshed. Eventually, the Sultan wears him down by saying that the war will reach Vikram without their aid, and he will watch yet another prince die. Bishan reluctantly agrees and says he and a company of men will go and ally with twice as many of the Sultan's men. Corey and Vikram both dread Bishan leaving to join the battle, with Vikram stating that if he does not return, he will be left completely alone. Bishan is not just the prince's protector. The two have formed a true friendship, and Vikram feels as if he is losing one of his only remaining allies as Bishan leaves. As Bishan travels to the battleground, he writes to Corey reminiscing on all the time they have spent together and questioning what he is and why he is fighting once again. It's clear that he wants to be with her as much as she wants to be with him, but he knows this is his duty. The issue closes on a somber note, seeing Count Grano arrive and begin his search for Stern, along with the revelation that the Sultan has left Bishan and his men to die, never sending his forces to aid their fight against the English. Bishan is surrounded by the enemy forces, and even after partially morphing into his demonic form, falls. However, the final panel sees his eyes alight in a red glow as the blood begins to rise up around him. Issue 4 opens on the battlefield as Bishan slaughters the English forces who had previously surrounded him. Vikram writes a letter to his friend, recounting stories he heard from his father of Bishan, the many names he was referred to as: Heart Eater, Flesh Reaver, Life Drinker. He also tells Bishan he needs him to return now more than ever, as something dark has happened since his departure. Count Grano and his men have raised the dead, and they stalk the streets as if in search of something yet unknown. He, Corey, and a few others have been safe in the palace thus far, but the creatures wander closer by the day. Vikram's thoughts are interrupted as he is told Stern wishes to speak with him. Stern tells him that he knows what now haunts the streets, and he is also quite adept at killing them, as we cut back to Bishan, who is now approaching the Sultan's camp. The man knows he has become a target after abandoning Bishan and the Zamorin forces, telling his men to double the security around his encampment. Stern, now freed with his gear returned to him, prepares to meet the vampire host outside the palace. Grano asks him if he was the one who killed Pierrefonds and why. Stern says that once he might have brought up God, good and evil, right and wrong, but since arriving here he has become somewhat disillusioned with these notions, and says that maybe it is simply human nature, that we are all monsters. Aided by archers in the palace, Stern goes to confront the creatures, and we see him kill Grano's second in command. It looks as though the tide may have turned until Grano joins the fight himself. Shedding his coat and taking flight, he quickly overpowers Stern as Corey interrupts the carnage, saying that it wasn't Stern who killed his ward. Bishan confronts the Sultan and is ready to kill him until his son enters the room. Bichon comes to his senses and casts the man aside, telling the child to be better than his father as he leaves the camp. Bichon writes again to Corey saying he fears he has become the monster so many people view him as, or perhaps he always was, and this is just a return to form. He has been killing indiscriminately and feels nothing. Bichon returns to Vikrampura, but quickly realizes he is too late. He finds the prince in bed being tended to by his staff. Vikram says that he was unable to stop them, as Bichon says that they will rebuild, and everything will return to normal in time. He searches for Corey and falls to his knees when he finds her and begins to cry. He feels that he has damned her. Corey has been turned by the Count in his absence. The final issue begins as Bichon and Corey are on a ship making their way to London. Corey can sense that they are getting close as she can feel Drano's presence in the back of her mind, a grim reminder of her new reality. The Count has sent a servant and coach to greet them as they enter the city. During the ride to his estate, Corey burns her hand in the coach window, prompting Bichon to apologize yet again for not being there to stop this from happening. The two are distant now, and Corey's cold demeanor hurts to see, but it's completely justified. She relates to Bichon how horrible the first days after her transformation were, the sun's warmth scorching her skin and feeling the urge to suck the life from those she used to enjoy spending time with. She reminds him that when she needed him the most he was gone, and she spent so much time and energy wondering where he was. She still loves him, but he willingly left her and everyone else unprotected, and she realized that he will always be a monster. Corey is now driven by her desire for revenge more than the love she used to feel. The couple arrives at Drano's estate and dine with him before carnage ensues. Rom uses this interaction to once again make statements about human nature and what drives us as a society. The excuses each man makes for their actions seem petty to the other, but entirely justified to themselves. Once again, it is stressed that there are no heroes in this story. While Bichon does serve as a focal point, he is not painted as a just or upstanding character. After one last argument, Drano and Bichon begin their battle outside the castle. The Count taunts Bichon, saying he's excited to see his potential, while Bichon attempts to get the first hit in. Bichon fails, as the Count has impeccable reaction time. The two trade blows, but the fight quickly turns in Drano's favor as he pins Bichon down and rips one of his horns off and stabs him through the back with it. Bichon crawls back to Corey, and her reaction is still very devoid of emotion. She tells Bichon that she is holding him to his word this time, no matter what. She asks Bichon to drink her blood and become the monster he is. He does so, with tears in his eyes. What follows is a sight to behold, as we see Bichon seemingly duplicate himself in a brief stint of body horror, as other copies of himself spring from his own body and anywhere his blood has fallen. This horde closes in on Drano as he watches in horror, unable to fend them off for long. As it becomes apparent that Drano is doomed, Corey drops the lantern she was holding, setting the field ablaze, wiping away any remains of the Count as well as the replicates of Bichon. Corey and Bichon walk away as the fire rages behind them. In the midst of the final battle, we also see another letter Vikram has written to Bichon, which he simply casts to the wind after finishing. He details the outcome of the conflict with the East India Company, and explains that in the wake of this victory, as part of the treaty which ended the war, Calicut will now be used as a shipyard for the East India Company. A factory will be built at the port. Vikram is unsure what has been gained through all this violence, as his homeland is still being occupied and used by foreign entities. As Bichon makes his way back to Calicut, Vikram rushes to meet him on the outskirts of town. The two embrace and they are happy to see one another. Bichon quickly reveals that he has returned to say goodbye. The final pages of the story drive home how these characters, those who survived this long, have been changed by the events of the book. None of these three have emerged in a better place than they were at the onset of the conflict. Vikram wishes Corey and Bichon would stay, but his response perfectly encapsulates the reality of the story. Everything has changed, and there is no going back. Bichon says that Corey loves this place, probably more than she loves him, but they lost something amidst the war and the fire, the victories and stolen time. The book closes on the words, "Nothing will ever be the same again." This book manages to successfully tell a war story, a love story, and a period piece about the Anglo-Mysore War, while also weaving in heavy doses of mythology and complex characters, each with their own views and motivations. Bichon is an interesting take on the detached immortal persona, as he actively tries his hardest to not become a Dr. Manhattan-esque figure and actually participate in events which could have drastic impact on those around him. He is forced to consider his role in the conflict, as the Sultan is right. He is a dozen times deadlier and more capable than simple foot soldiers, and could potentially have ended the war as quickly as it began. His conversations with Corey about his origins also prompt him to reflect on his life, and throughout the series it is clear that he constantly struggles with his true nature and when to let loose. He tries to protect those he loves without reverting to an animalistic state and losing what humanity he has left. Those around him know what he is, but do not think any differently of him and seek to hold on to their relationships with him. However, Bishan is not a reluctant hero or an idealized figure. He is deeply flawed at the beginning and end of the story. It seems that he and Corey are still in a relationship to some extent and are going to start a new life somewhere in spite of all the pain they have been through. I was glad to see that, even though it is far from what I would consider a happy ending. Like I mentioned at the start, this is a story that I went into completely blind, and it's the first work of Ram V's that I had read. I love this book from start to finish. In case it isn't obvious by now, I highly recommend it. And there was so much I left out. All the intricacies of Bishan's origin, and the symbolism of the tree he and Corey meet under, there's way more than I could have covered in this video. Please do yourself a favor and check this book out. It's always a good idea to support creators you like and try out some new things every once in a while. Since reading this story, I have read some other Ram V titles like Rare Flavors and The Many Deaths of Layla Starr, both of which are also amazing. Of course, Ram does not need any publicity from me. He's had a wildly successful Detective Comics run, as well as Venom at Marvel, along with a few other indie and Big 2 titles he's published in recent years. But that's about it for me. Thank you to everyone who made it this far. Please like the video if you had fun with this. It helps a ton. Leave me a comment down below if you have read this story or if I have convinced you to give it a shot, because that's really what I made this channel for. I want to gush about the stuff I like and talk to people who feel the same and bring some positivity to a hobby so many people seem to only find negativity online about. Again, thanks to all of you watching, and I'll catch you in the next upload. See ya.